Welcome to the Teach Better Talk podcast, your official podcast for the Teach Better Podcast Network, the hub for all things education, brought to you by teachbetter.com. The Teach Better Talk podcast is committed to answering your burning questions through a variety of lenses and bringing new offers to you and your colleagues to help you thrive throughout the school year. My name is Ray Hewart, and we love your questions here on the pod. If you have any questions that you'd love us to consider as topics for future episodes, please share them with us by emailing info@teachbetter.com.
Our theme this week is focused on design spaces. I want to get into how we can use our spaces creatively, how we can make sure that our classrooms are set up with success, and also how we can use our spaces in non-traditional ways, which is what this episode is going to be all about. Before we get into this conversation, answering the question of how we can use our spaces better than ever, I do want to give a quick shout out to Megan Polke on the Teach Better team. She is an amazing educator that does actually professional development for our team. So you may have seen her in your school building. She does so much with co-teaching and special education relationships. I know she's working a lot right now with special education departments. And let me talk about how spaces really get into her teaching. She not only looks at how to differentiate between different student needs, but also how to set up a classroom that's safe and accessible for all learners. So huge shout out to Megan doing the good work here on the team. I know many of us are out training in schools on a constant basis, but Megan is just somebody that does it so well. So huge shout out to her. Somebody that also seems to do work extremely well is our incredible guest. Adrian is here with us. Adrian, how are you feeling? I really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you, Ray. I feel really good.
Adrian, this is such an honor to have you on because you are actually the founder of an organization that seems to be all over with educators looking to not only have creative opportunities in their spaces, but actually allow their students to compete and do great work in the school. So before we get too far in to the fun, do you mind telling us a little about yourself?
Yes, sure. I'm a career engineer. I spent 19 years working software development and corporate engineering jobs after a master's degree in computer architecture and in computer science. I pre-pandemic, so around 2019, 2020 timeframe, I decided to go full-time into education. Actually, first I taught some higher ed, so I went part-time, but then I decided to go and work with middle school and a high school for a full-time technology teaching and coding job. And the reason I did that was I had many reasons to do that. Some of them were that I have been always passionate about education. Over the time, I taught higher ed as a part-time after-hour job here and there, but I also wanted to get away from the corporate world. I wanted to get more into to give back to my community, and frankly, I was looking to actually slow down a little bit, which of course it did not happen because teaching is still quite intense as a job. But I'm very happy. I will retire as a professional educator. Oh, by the way, I recently got certified both in computer science with the state of Florida and as a professional educator, which was quite an endeavor. I did not understand when I started this in 2019. I didn't quite understand what that meant. It's almost like going back to college a little bit.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty intense thing, but I'm happy I'm over that. One of the things that I ran into when I started to teach coding and with this particular middle school, I bumped into the robotics lab. And I was very impressed. I saw kids, like middle school kids, building Lego type of robots and things. The technology was different, similar to Lego. It's called Vex. But I love that. Like, I did not need much time to realize I want to do quite a bit of that as part of the whatever is left for me in education until I will retire. So anyways, it was in the middle of the pandemic though, and I couldn't do much because you could not touch parts. It was I had all kinds of restrictions. First year, my administration was very nice though and very supportive. They said, okay, you want to do this, we're going to give you the opportunity to do this, which I appreciate that. But because of the pandemic, I had to do it online for like a year or so, something like that, which is, it's good, but it's not the same thing as having actually building the actual robots with your own hands. And then when we came back, I pursued that like full blast. I started to put together a competition team and all that.
Yeah, we're going to get into highlighting this competition work that now Adrian is in, because that is a huge part of what has been taking your attention these days. Before we get into that fun, Adrian, it is so common for educators, especially those that are listening to podcasts. We hear about educators that move into the corporate world. Like they leave education and they go that direction. You did it the opposite way. You were in the corporate world and you were like, you're like, ick, this is no fun. I want to go work in education. And something you highlighted here was that it gave you a little more purpose. You really enjoyed the work you were doing. Can you speak to that a little bit? I feel like we need that reminder sometimes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's actually very important. People generally tend to focus too much on the money and to not to realize there's other things that are actually important, not just the money. I mean, money are important, but it's not the only thing. Like I have fun, in my 20s, in my 30s, up until like I hit mid 40s in corporate jobs. I made really good money and all that up to a point where it was taking too much time. It was taking too much time out of my, daily schedule. And, I had my daughter too. I wanted to educate my daughter as well. She was growing up a little, needed more help. And, but that's not to say that I did not have fun in corporate. I have fun. I make good money. I run projects all over the world. I did a lot of hands-on coding. So I was not one of those just people that just managing or whatever. I did the real thing and I have fun with that. But you know how it is, you work 70, 80 hours a week up to a point where you say, hey, what am I doing here? Actually, I'm at a point where I actually don't need that much money anymore because I'm okay. So let me do something else. Let me find some purpose in something. And I honestly, I couldn't figure out anything else but teaching because obviously I was good in school. I liked it. I was also educating my daughter.
Well, and it sounds like in your role in the corporate space, there was an element of like working with others and training that you were already doing. So those skills probably translated well. When
exactly, they did. And I did some of that. There was some training adults. Like I trained engineers at Bell Canada. I trained people at Sonic One in California. I had to travel a little bit back and forth. But that was not the core side of the job. Now, back to your point, some teachers that go into corporate from teaching, that's fine. I'm not saying it's definitely a career choice, but I advise teachers generally to do their research to see if a corporate job is really for them, and especially not to start with preconceived notions. One of the things that I hear a lot is that teaching does not pay well. It depends. It may not pay well and compared to what a corporate job pays. But I think you have to compare apples to apples. There are certainly advantages when you work in education. Not all the teaching jobs pay bad. Like my teaching job does not pay bad. Pays very decent in reference to the market down here in South Florida. It also offers some after school and clubs opportunities, which adds something to that. Plus, look, now I'm on vacation, right? It's 2 months. If I was going to have a corporate job, I would not have 2 months vacation. You know that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting here as we reflect. Sometimes it seems as though the grass is greener on the other side, and something I really really hear from your story is education was a great space because their skills translated well. It gave you something that you were missing in the corporate world, which was a little bit more purpose and enjoyment in the work versus just
Right.
working for the big guy and just saying, yeah, I'm doing my job, and then I go home and I'm not sure really what I'm accomplishing day to day.
Right.
And then the other thing is, if you're an educator and you're thinking about maybe needing to make more money or looking to change your job, another thing you highlighted, Adrian, is that there's a lot of jobs in education that isn't the job you currently have right now as you're listening on your way driving to the grocery store or on your lunch break. Many of us, I think, live in a bubble in education where we're a classroom teacher in the middle of Illinois, living our life. At least that was my life. And you don't quite see the jobs that exist in education outside of you become a classroom teacher and then
Exactly.
a coach and then an assistant principal and then a principal and then a director and maybe a superintendent, or you stop along the way. And
Exactly.
I think a beautiful element of this is highlighting, if we're reflective and we say, hey, what do I like about my job? What are things I'm looking to have changed? There's actually a wide variety of options before you decide to, completely leave the field altogether, which I appreciate. And I'm so glad that you're so fulfilled in the work you're personally doing on a day-to-day basis now.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, teaching is definitely slightly different than what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody should live with stereotypes. They
No
should
kidding.
actually try to do before they come up to a conclusion. Yeah.
So true. Oh my gosh, the misconceptions that exist everywhere in the world. And may we all be a little bit more open-minded to better understanding not only how difficult education is, but how different all areas are. Adrian, I really want to get into the conversation around the robotics teams that your crew is working on. I know we're eventually working towards the key questions we're answering this week, which is how to use our spaces better, how we are going to really be creative in not only our classroom design spaces, but how we can use our hallways, our cafeterias, and really looking at this stuff. It lends itself perfectly to the competitions that you are now supporting educators to support students through. I'd love to highlight the program before we get too far into our questions. Do you mind talking about the VIX robotics team?
Absolutely. So let's talk about it. So this is what I built so far, 2 middle school teams. And I recruited them from my classroom, from some of my best students from coding classes. I teach coding and engineering, so I have access to plenty of talent. What I started was pretty much a rigorous training program with videos and resources from VIX, and based a lot on my own online research and talking to other coaches and stuff like that. So we've been only at it for 2 years, not to say that we are super experts in this, but good news is that the first year we have already made it to the state level, which is actually quite difficult because there are teams from all over the world who are very, very competitive and very passionate about engineering and coding and stuff like that. So we did good. We did well. By the way, next year we have an objective to go to Worlds, which is like the ultimate,
The ultimate dream. Yeah. And
Yeah.
what I love
It is
about
a dream.
It is, of course, a dream. And what I love about the program you've designed, because I've really been following this incredible stuff, is you help the teacher from the very beginning, even if they're not an expert in coding, robotics, engineering. You're looking at these educators and saying, hey, there's so much value for students, even if you know nothing starting out. The program that we've put together is kind of like the design for dummies, right? Like, even if you are starting out not understanding what robotics is, I got you, let me help you. And we can not only work through the value this concept brings for students, which is really important right now in the world we're living in, but also working towards those competitions, which it's just so fun, right? Who doesn't want to go to state? Who doesn't want to compete in Worlds? What a good life opportunity that you're exposing students to.
It is really a lot of fun, right? Yeah, absolutely. I would like to talk a little bit about the program. It's called VIX Builders Collective with uh, like an emphasis. The keyword is collective. In other words, we're in this together. You're not alone. You don't have to specialize in coding. You don't have to be an engineer. In fact, any kind of teacher who has some time and desire can do it. We will help them step by step. We will tell them what they have to do to start the program, from recruiting students to coaching, allocating time, PD. We do a lot of online PD and offline. Okay, and then other things like funding spaces. We're getting back to the spaces, right? Spaces are very important. Robotics, and we actually use the cafeteria and the hallways to set up the field. So yeah, we even use the field. The what do you call it? The sports field.
Yeah, like outdoors. I love that. That's really why I felt like this program was so beneficial to bring to the Teach Better community. Because those of you listening, whether you're a principal, a coach, an educator, you could be just a parent who wants to get involved in this. Depending on the capacity that you have, this is a group that you can start because you're looking to start a club, and maybe that's a desire that you have, and you're looking for a fun way to engage students outside of the classroom. This could be a cool thing, friends. I used to have a tutorial that every Friday we were trying to find different cool things to have students do. It was kind of like a study hall throughout the week or an RTI time, but Fridays were always a loss. This is a perfect Friday opportunity. Get your students moving, thinking about the content, and getting into how robotics and coding can actually impact their life without you as the educator needing to be the expert. So we're going to keep talking about this, Adrian. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back, and we're getting into your questions.
Okay.
Quick pause to give a shout out to the Teach Better blog. Head over to teachbetter.com/blog to read articles from guest bloggers all over the world sharing their ideas, whether it be classroom strategies, leadership ideas, fundraiser tools and tricks, or anything in between to reach all of your learners. Head over to teachbetter.com/blog to get reading.
How are you using your time effectively, and how are you making your spaces work for you? That is what we're diving into. Adrian has done a wonderful job giving us a vision of how this work came to be, and now he wants to support you in doing it. This is not a sales pitch, friends. We don't care if you actually move into this space. Our goal here is to expose you to the ways that you can use your spaces to enhance your students' learning opportunities. Adrian, as we mentioned earlier, we also talked about using the students' physical spaces or the teachers' physical spaces for these types of activities, whether it be the teacher's classroom, the hallways, the sports fields, the cafeterias, anything in between. Give us a little more insight. What are we using this for? If I'm standing in the hallway, if I'm interested in this program, I sign up and I get all this support. What are the students actually doing? What if I don't know what a robotics competition is like?
Okay. So here's how a competition goes. You have to set up a field, and the field is 6x8, and it's a plastic type of board, and that's where you actually drive the robots that you built, and it's literally two teams competing at the same time. And here's where we did this. We did it in my classroom, but in my classroom it's kind of tight because there's usually two teams that need to move around and drive their robots. There's two students in each team. You really have to have like a lot of space in your classroom to do that. You either have to move benches or whatever, which sometimes we do, but it's kind of inconvenient. Like I said, we did it on the field, on the baseball field. It's actually very good. Well, we're in Florida, so I don't know how that will work in places where it's cold or it snows, but here it works. It's plenty of space. You don't deal with any restrictions. The other students can actually join and cheer, and there's cheering during competitions. So it's a lot of fun. especially
I
middle.
love the idea of just making educators aware that you can do robotics on the baseball field. Sign me up. I'm a fan.
Right, right. Yeah, which is something you wouldn't think of. Yeah, I mean, we even did it in a park, in one of these government public parks or whatever. But inside the school, we did it on the field, we did it in the classroom, we did it a few times in the cafeteria. We're not using the hallways that much. We're using them more like for testing, but we are using all these spaces. And there is another teacher who offered to share their classroom and to move benches, but that's less convenient because you have to, to travel to carry blocks and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I love the concept of like, okay, we use the hallways for practice. We're using the fields outside when it's good weather to practice competitions and get into it with students. We're using the cafeteria when it's raining. We're in the classroom if we can move our benches. I mean, this is really looking at robotics being more than, and I hate to sound like a ignorant educator here, but robotics being more than sitting in a computer lab. Like we're really getting our students out.
It really is. It really is not
spaces.
sitting in a computer lab. Yeah.
All while you don't have to do any extra work to being the expert. Adrian, I love that we were able to highlight this earlier, but I want to dive deeper. Something about your program, not only about teaching the teacher how to use their space and bring in robotics and coding, but you also, and I have to make sure we bring this up, you teach educators how to fundraise. You teach educators how to get the support they need so they don't have to do that by themselves. Because when I hear about wanting to start robotics in the hallways of my school building, that's exciting. But I'm thinking about, how am I going to recruit students? How am I going to get the money for this? Wait, I'm going to send my kids to state? That sounds expensive. Like,
Right.
We need some thoughts on this.
Right. So in terms of fundraising, we have a pretty formal program that we put together. I actually don't personally specialize in that. I tend to work with people who specialize, for example, grants, applying for federal grants and stuff like that. It's very specialized work. We work with a gentleman out of Hawaii, actually, who's like a big time federal grant, more than 20 years of experience. He literally pulls millions of dollars in grant funding. He has industrial size equipment when it comes to robotics. It's just amazing. Having more experience is particular in this grant, 21st century CCLC, and in multiple states, he does most of that work. Now, what I usually do, I recommend a number of different methods or different activities for fundraising, and they were according to my research and what I've seen other teachers doing, other clubs doing. And there are things from cookie selling, like the Girl Scouts, pitching local private mechanical shops or companies. They need to be somewhat related to mechanical work or technical work, because otherwise they're not going to be interested.
But you're kind of getting like sponsors, they're reaching out to the community, they're raising money for the community to invest in the students.
Yes, pretty much so, yeah. We also offer, with our team, in our school in particular, we offer display advertising. If somebody sponsors the team, we will wear their shirt with their
I love it.
logo.
So there's so many good ideas for this. And I know you also focus on how to recruit students depending on what they're looking for. Yeah, I love that. Stick with us, friends. We're getting into some major takeaways. And I also want to make sure you can meet up with Adrian and his team to learn more about this support for your own school. Be right back. Here we are wrapping up the conversation of design, but it does not end here. Friends, don't forget that all week we are focusing on how to use your spaces intentionally. And I love that we're able to highlight robotics being a way that you can transform learning to be outside the walls of your classroom in a very creative way. I myself am not in any way an expert of robotics or coding, but I love being connected to people who will help me do it well. And Adrian and I have had numerous conversations before this podcast, and I've been a good stalker of his work. And I love being able to introduce him to our community to look through finding the right people to help you be successful in the things that inspire you. Adrian, before we get into our 3 major takeaways, do you mind sharing your website? How can our educators look into this program that you offer?
Sure. You have to go to robolearnnow.org.
Yes.
If you go to Robo, R-O-B-O, learn, Learn, now is N-O-W.org, you're going to see their information about our teams, the instructors, VIX competitions, and this particular program called VIX Builders Collective.
I love it, friends. It's a very cool website just to click around. So even if you decide that this isn't for you right now and you just love the perspective of seeing students taking robotics in a way that looks different than how I envisioned it, at least, this is definitely a cool website to check out. Lots of just easy resources, good people to connect with. Adrian, as our community is wrapping up the podcast here, do you mind sharing 3 major takeaways that we hope our community remembers about this opportunity?
Yes, of course, sure. First, I think it's this idea of creative spaces. How can you use your school spaces in a creative way for whatever project or program you may have? I invite everybody to think out of the box and to look at things thoroughly, kind of see things from the helicopter. Many times you can use spaces that you may have not think of. You may have not thought of using your cafeteria or your hallways, and yes, you can, or your baseball field. So that would be one thing to take away from here. Secondly is, in my opinion, is that if you have an interest in STEM and or robotics and or coding, you don't have to specialize in that in order to actually start a club. And clubs are impactful, and we can help you guys starting a club in like no time. There should not be concerns with funding or things like that, because almost it doesn't matter where you are in the United States, you will be able to do it in one way or another. I mean, we have many ways to put things together, whether it's the parents funding it or through some grants or through some fundraising. There's always a solution if you're willing to work a little bit on it. A little steady, actually. So, but yeah, that would be my second thing. The third takeaway, I'm thinking about it.
I think the third takeaway, Adrian, that I really have valued about your story, I know it doesn't necessarily have to using design spaces, but is to make sure you're working in a space that fuels you. If you're going to put in 70 hours, 80 hours, 50 hours a week, make sure that it's something that you feel like when you go home at the end of the day, you've done something to better this world. I really appreciated that about your story.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in reference to my corporate experience. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So wonderful. Friends, I would love to make sure you connect with Adrian. And of course, I really want you all to walk into the spaces, those learning spaces we have, and be able to see them in a new light. Make sure you stick with us all week as we're focusing on design spaces. And since you made it to this far at the end of the episode, we appreciate you subscribing, rating, and reviewing over on the pod, Teach Better Talk, wherever you're listening. Or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate you being there. Adrian, thank you so much again for popping in.
Thank you, Ray. I appreciate the opportunity.